casa cheia para ver o Tim Blanks, meu querido colega jornalista, editor do Business of Fashion, que vai ser entrevistado agora pela Daniela Falcão, que é diretora-geral das edições Globo Condé Nast, e pela Silvia Rogar, que é diretora de redação da Vogue Brasil, para a gente falar bastante sobre jornalismo de moda aqui e no mundo. Bem-vindos. Lembrando, gente, que nos 15 minutos finais a gente abre o microfone, então, para perguntas. Aproveitem esses 3 profissionais ótimos que estão aqui, que estão com um pouco de pressa para ir embora, mas eles vão poder cumprir, sim, os 15 minutos para a pergunta, tá bom?
Eba. Plateia bem cheia, né?
Não, na verdade, a gente perde o avião, se for necessário, para todo mundo ter tempo de perguntar. Eu estou muito feliz de estar aqui hoje, não só porque acho, e vocês vão descobrir um pouco, quem não conhece tanto a trajetória do Tim Blanks desde o início, por que ele é uma figura tão importante no mundo do jornalismo de moda, mas eu estou feliz, sobretudo, porque ele também, além de ser uma pessoa muito importante, ele é uma das pessoas com melhor astral, mais queridas, e acho que ele ajuda a quebrar aquele estereótipo que todo editor de moda tem que fazer carão ou fingir de difícil. Ele é uma pessoa extremamente acessível, curiosa e que soube se reinventar mais de uma vez, como a gente vai mostrar ao longo dessa conversa. E eu estou muito feliz de dividir o palco com a Silvia, porque eu fico brincando que a minha memória de moda ela começa só em 2005, que é quando efetivamente eu entrei na Vogue. E a Silvia é uma apaixonada e fanática por moda muito antes de mim. Então, ela tem a memória, por isso ela vai começar o bloco de perguntas agora, porque ela acompanha o Tim desde do Fashion Files e da época dele na TV. Eu conheci ele já famoso ali, mas ela pegou o início. Então, ainda que as nossas perguntas não sejam cronológicas, mas a gente vai começar tentando fundamentar um pouco e mostrar todas as transformações que ele viu. Então, Sil, a bola está com você.
Bom, eu achei importante a gente conversar um pouquinho, porque o Tim Blanks ele é um cara que ele é relevante desde 89 na moda. Ele foi da primeira onda do jornalismo de moda na televisão. Ele fazia o Fashion Files, que começou em 89. Ele foi da primeira onda da internet, no Style.com. Ele era o editor, ele era o crítico dos desfiles. E hoje ele se mantém tão relevante quanto em 89, fazendo Business of Fashion. Acho que é uma das raras figuras que sabe atravessar o tempo aí na moda, tendo a mesma relevância. So relevant as you are in 89 and you are now, so you are always evolving in fashion. So the first thing that I want to ask you, Tim, Fashion File is part of the fashion memories of a whole generation. All the time when I interview some designer, Christopher Kane, all these guys, they always say, no, Fashion File is part of my memories, and Tim Blanks is my fashion hero. Where's the idea came from of the program? How did you start to decide to do fashion on TV in 89?
89. Well, my life in fashion has been my life in fashion began as an accident. I was living in Toronto in Canada, and I had been art directing animated movies. I actually worked on Inspector Gadget, I worked on Strawberry Shortcake, and I never imagined a life in fashion at all. But I was freelancing for a lot of magazines in Toronto, and I decided I needed a full-time job. And the only magazine that offered me a full-time job was a fashion magazine. And so I went to work for a fashion magazine. I became the features editor, and then when the editor left, I became the editor. It was all very unlikely. And the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, was starting a 24-hour news channel, and they needed programming. So I thought, I'd read about the Close show on the BBC in London. I'd never seen it, but I'd heard about it, and I thought, why not propose a magazine show on television about fashion? So we went to the CBC, we made a pilot, and because Canada is obsessed with fairness, they said, well, we can't just give it to you, we have to let every other magazine in the country make a pilot as well. So every other magazine in the country made a fashion pilot, and they were all horrible. And then the one that we made at the magazine I was editing was the one they went with, thank God, because it was our idea. And that's how Fashion File started in 1989. It was an odd moment. I thought it was a very obvious thing to do, but it was the timing. This is the thing about accidents. It was just as the supermodel thing was happening. And so when the first time we went to Paris, first time we ever filmed, I remember Linda Evangelista still had long hair, and then she got that short haircut. And we just started covering fashion just as the world became obsessed with it. And that's how Fashion File started. It was a sort of wonderful accident that turned into this whole other thing.
It was broadcast in how many countries?
It was, I sat down one day, I'm not very good at mathematics, but I sat down one day and I worked out that if all the homes in the world that had access to Fashion File were watching it at the same time, there would have been 4 billion homes watching Fashion File. We were in 120 countries. So I could go to Morocco and people would go Fashion File. I could go to Russia and people would go Fashion File. But Thailand, you know.
Rio?
Rio.
Times
the first time
Rio.
I came to Rio, it was insane. It was really exciting. Because the funny thing was, I left Toronto and I moved to London right after we started the show. And just about the only country in the world where Fashion File wasn't on was England. So I never saw it, and nobody knew what it was. And so in England, I never watched the show. I had no idea what was happening. Then when I would go to Brazil or another country, and people would be like, "Oh my God, I love Fashion File." Oh, that's nice. And then suddenly I realized that people were watching it, you know, all over the world. And that was really the beginning. When fashion went onto cable TV, that was the beginning of a huge thing for fashion, when it became like an entertainment. It almost, instead of an industry, it became an entertainment for people. People who wouldn't think about going into a store and spending a lot of money on clothes would watch fashion on television. And you know, it was so funny because coming to Rio, I mean, filming in Rio and obviously filming a lot of bikinis, I would hear from college boys and they would all watch Fashion File because there was a lot of very beautiful women wearing not very many clothes on Fashion File. So we had this really odd fan bases everywhere, of just all over the world. And my whole life since then, every single day somebody comes up to me and says, "I grew up watching Fashion File," which of course makes me feel like, you know, granddad fashion. But it was just very, very good timing, I
For
think.
how long did you stay on air?
I did Fashion File from 1989 until 2005.
2005. So.
Yes, it's a long time. I tend not to be very, I'm not very ambitious. So when I'm doing something, I do it for a long time, you know. I'm not looking to move.
In music, cinema, literature, painting, which art forms do you think are crucial in the formation of a fashion writer?
For me, everything. I actually love music more than anything in my life, in my personal, in my own life. Music has always been the most important thing to me. Music is what I originally started writing about when I first started doing journalism when I was at university. Because I think fashion soaks everything up. I think that fashion is a super absorbent medium, and I think more than any other, I think fashion absorbs movies, it absorbs music, it absorbs theater, I mean ballet, opera, whatever. When you look at the great fashion designers, people like Alexander McQueen or John Galliano in recent times, they are so engaged by everything. And I don't believe you can, I don't believe you can write about life without knowing everything there is to, well, as much as you can know about life. And I think with fashion, it is very, very important to be aware of what's happening in every other area, especially when you go to a show. I'm a huge fan of fashion shows, and people keep saying the fashion show is dead, we have to find another way to present fashion. I totally disagree with that, because I think when you see a show and a designer is giving you what is on their minds as in the most complete way they can, with the hair and the makeup and the set and the casting and the music, it all creates a sort of stew, this kind of casserole of influences that come from all over the place. I mean, when you go, I don't know how many of you have seen the new Blade Runner movie, but when I'm sitting watching that movie, I can just see 100 collections in the future that movie will inspire. Just like the other Blade Runner movie inspired everybody for years. You just see something and you know it's going to enter into the fashion's bloodstream, and it will be important. And I think that's why fashion is always exciting to me, and that's why I love going to fashion shows.
He loves music too. I took a ride with him. Eu peguei uma carona com ele no show do YouTube. E aí eu estava falando casualmente a ele. No Gallagher was your neighbor or?
No. I live in sort of a pop star neighborhood in London. I didn't choose to live there because pop stars live there, but there's Noel Gallagher, there's Björk, there's Chrissy Hynde, there's Paul Weller, Annie Lennox used to live there. It's a nice neighborhood.
So ele estava contaminado ali pela música, porque ele era amigo do Oasis. And you were friends with the bass player of U2?
No, the drummer.
The drummer.
The drummer, yeah. For a long, long time, before they were kind of...
I'm going ahead in our files, because you mentioned fashion shows. This was supposed to be one of the last questions, but since you bring it out already, so you already answered the question that you're not one of the journalists that are saying that the fashion weeks are dead or fashion shows make no sense. But why do you think there is so much criticism? And do you think that the way calendars are organized with now you have the pret-à-porter, you have couture gaining importance, you have resort collections, and even what was only commercial, like the pre-fall, they're also becoming fashion entertainment in shows. Do you think this is maybe overwhelming the system? How do you see it?
There is a problem. For sure there's a problem. I think it's kind of strange that there are shows when designers have sold the clothes already, and then they're having the show after they've actually had the selling season. But the thing about fashion shows is, to me, is that they focus. They're a focus, not just for the industry, but for designers. They make their statement, and now there are so many other media that statement can be broadcast through, like social media, obviously. But a fashion show now has a second life and a third life and a fourth life through all the ways that you can offer it. I appreciate that there are other ways to do things. I've seen some very creative presentations, which I think are probably extremely cost-effective, although presentations get expensive as well. But that's a sort of cost-effective answer to doing fashion shows. But there is, for me, that nothing replaces that sort of central moment where a designer gives you the vision in its purest form, where they have layered the vision through all the, with the teams that work with them. I understand that virtual reality is going to probably have a huge effect at some point, but I think that there is still, like I said, there's still that central thing of sitting in a show with maybe this many people or a few hundred more and experiencing fashion physically. And we are physical creatures, so virtual reality and internet relays and reviews of shows accompanied by 40 tiny little two-dimensional images still don't do justice to the actual experience. It's something I've always felt quite strongly about when I'm writing about fashion shows, because I don't consider myself to be a critic. I mean, I think what I would like to do most of all is be everybody in the seat. I'm in the seat on behalf of everybody and telling people what I'm seeing, what I'm experiencing, what I'm hearing, what I'm smelling sometimes. Fashion shows have a smell, some of them. it's not always a nice smell, but most of the time it's just a sensory experience.
Were you in the last Paco Rabanne, in which they tried to have the feeling that we were in a
It was like a club in the 80s.
So you
like
could even see
all
the sweating and the smell of people sweating, because they make us sweat a lot.
Yes.
I wasn't there. I actually bring that smell with me a lot of the time. But, you know, I think that it was so interesting, the last Gucci show, which Alessandro Michele staged as a rave. And the music was amazing. The lights were like, you know, when they have that strobe light, they have that warning on, there will be flashing lights. The lights were flashing. There was dry ice everywhere. And it was like being in my favorite nightclub in the 80s. And that's what he wanted. And then there were all these journalists saying, we couldn't see anything, and what's the point of doing this? You know, you go to a fashion show to look at clothes, and people getting then, you know, really panties in a bunch about all this stuff going on. And Alessandro wanted atmosphere. And that to me is a fashion show. You're conveying the essence of the collection. And if the essence of the collection is this fabulous sensory experience, which Gucci is. I mean, a Gucci collection is like nothing else around. It just is an overload. There was a wonderful experience to reflect, you know, the nature of the collection. We keep hearing, maybe this is an audience of millennials. I don't know how people feel about being called millennials. I know if I was a millennial, I would hate to be called a millennial. Like I hated being called a baby boomer because I wasn't a baby boomer. But we keep hearing about how they want experiences, how the thing now is experiences. And that was such an experience, and it was such a clever way to take a conventional idea, like a fashion show is a conventional idea, and turn it into something that was really relevant. But that worked for the people in the room. If you looked at photos of it or saw videos of it, you didn't get the volume of the music, which was extreme. You didn't get the sort of, the way the models moved in and out of the smoke and the, and it was incredible. And that's why fashion shows will always have a place, because you just can't replace that. You can't replace the physicality. You can't replace the fact that you are a human being sitting in a space with a whole lot of other human beings, having this incredible experience, like the best high you could get without drugs. You know, I just thought that it was amazing.
So you don't quite believe in see now by now model?
It doesn't work for everybody. You know, I think that the heart of fashion is desire. You desire. You see something and you desire it. That's what the primary impulse of fashion is. And half of desire is anticipation. You look forward. You look forward to the object of your desire being in your possession. You dream about it. You know, this is the fashion myth. So see now, buy now just takes all of that away. It works for some people. I think it works for jeans and T-shirts and things. But for designers who are creating a story, molding this amazing story that they're trying to seduce you with, see now, buy now doesn't work. You know, Dries Van Noten. You don't want to see now, buy now, Dries Van Noten. You want to look at it, dream about it, think about it. You know,
and finally,
you
said anticipation is part of desire. If you take this out, then there's no desire.
I mean, we're talking about Gucci. That's what Gucci has brought back to fashion, is desire. Marco was talking in our speech the other day, our conversation the other day, about emotion. And see now, buy now is not emotion to me. It's like, I shouldn't knock it because, as I said, it works for some people, but not for everybody. I can't imagine, you know, Valentino dresses, or you know, it just doesn't work that way.
Do you believe there's still space for traditional fashion critique in an era in which images from shows are instantly on the web, generating spontaneously likes and dislikes? Oh
yeah, I like I said, I don't think of myself as a critic. It's the word critic that's the problem there. There is a place for somebody to be eyes and ears.
A storyteller.
A storyteller, yeah, absolutely. That will not change. If that didn't exist, a lot of internet coverage is also, when you read people writing about collections, they're writing about photographs. They've looked at a picture. It is an issue that fashion is three-dimensional, and when you're looking at a two-dimensional image, you're seeing at most half. All the stuff that goes on in the back of clothes. When they go down the catwalk, they come towards you and they turn around and go back, and there's something happening on the back, which you never see. So you get these people writing away, well, this is awful, this is, blah, blah, blah. And they haven't, there's a three-dimensional thing which I would try to communicate. I would ideally want to communicate when I'm writing about what I'm seeing. And there will always be a place for that. I don't think, fashion tells stories, but fashion needs storytellers as well. And there will always be a place for that.
How do you keep a critical distance, even if you're not a critic, you're a storyteller? When you're writing about friends, you have a lot of friends in fashion, and people you know for so long. Do you get involved, or if you think that maybe the designer had a point, but he was not able to touch you, or it was just out of place? How do you do this without harming the feelings of a good friend?
It's a funny... I don't go through life trying to hurt people's feelings anyway, on any level, because I'm a nice guy. But it doesn't mean that everybody has a good day at the office. I've been writing about covering fashion for nearly 35 years, and I have made friends. There is that weird thing that you can keep your distance, but it's inevitable that you make friends, you meet people you like, and it's inevitable that when you're writing about, when somebody has done 30 collections, that some of them are going to be bad. And I have to say that. I tend not to be, well, this is awful. I tend to find other ways to say it, but people have always said, I can tell when you don't like something, because I can read between the lines. So I have had, I think with people that I'm friendly with, I'm not saying I go on holidays with them. It's not that kind of friend, but I will have dinner with them. And, my friends aren't, the friends that I do go on holiday with aren't the people that I'm covering. But I think that most people are professional enough to realize that I'm doing my job. And me doing my job and me going for dinner with them is, a separate thing. I learned a long time ago that I worked for an editor who went on to become extremely famous, and she was a monster in the daytime, an absolute monster. She would scream, she was abusive, she was the worst possible boss. End of the day, off we went for dinner. She was able to separate. And I was able to separate how horrible she was as a boss and how great she was as a friend. It's kind of psychotic. But I think with it's been a very interesting thing recently. I did give a bad review to a designer who I have been quite friendly with over the years, who instantly did this Instagram post about how I should be fired. And I thought, well, that's a bit strange. He is a little bit with the internet. He's a little bit Trumpian with his tweets. But that has hardly ever happened to me. I think most people, because, next season will be better.
And did you respond to...
No, there's no point. That would be opening it'd be like knocking over a beehive. It would never stop if I'd responded. But there was another thing years ago when I really, really love Jean-Paul Gaultier as a designer. I think he's one of the greatest designers ever. And he'd hit this rough patch. And that he went public with it was stupid. And it got turned into a feud. And I don't feud, but he feuded. So it was a bit unfortunate. And that was one instance where there was no repair, which is a shame, which was a real shame. But as I said, when you cover people for a long time, they will have a good season, and maybe there'll be a bad season, and the next season will be good again. And actually, sometimes it's really odd. People will write to you and say, thank you for saying that, because I needed to hear that for myself to go back and work on a problem that I knew I had, which is really interesting, because that's constructive criticism, which is the best kind, rather than destructive criticism.
Going back to this recent FOID you have, your comment, I don't know how many of you remember or follow, your comment was very straight to the point. You kind of said you need to move on. You have been doing the same thing over and
Didn't
this
you
was
agree?
Everyone agreed.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't write fashion critics, but this was all the same. You knew you were telling what everyone was saying behind curtains or in comments. So you knew probably, you're very brave in a way to say, did you expect that there would be, and you knew how the designer is so passionate about Instagram, and he argued with clients, he argued with any journalist. That's what you have been doing. It's kind of funny, but you knew that would probably. There was a moment in which you say, it's time to say it, even if it's going to be a bit of disruption in the net.
I knew I'd be banned. Yeah, I knew I'd be banned, and I was. Yeah, I knew I would be, but I've been banned before. From other shows. I've been banned for giving good reviews, which
Really?
I got banned for giving a good review that the designer thought misunderstood what they'd done. I thought, but I loved the show. It was my favorite show of the season. Yeah, but that's not what I was doing. I was like, whoa. I mean, that really brings it home to you that what I'm doing is an entirely personal response. I'm not laying down the law. I'm saying this is what I thought. And that's what I'm coming back to writing about Friends. This is what I thought. And they know that it's not, I'm not standing up like God and saying this is awful, stop what you're doing now and leave the business. I think the problem was Style.com, when I was reviewing for Style.com, was incredibly powerful. And buyers would read reviews and they would cancel appointments and things, and that was a strange, you don't want to take the bread out of somebody's mouth. That was when things got a little bit weird. It wasn't me, it was just the nature of the business. Business of fashion is slightly different. I'm a lot more critical writing for business of fashion, but I think it's a different audience, so I don't really, I still have to face the consequences sometimes, it's true. I'm learned to run through crowds with a bag over my head or something, my hand over my face, but I quite like that actually. I like getting a reaction.
Silvia, your next question.
And what's the best and the worst part of to be a fashion nomad? Because Jean, he's always traveling for the cruise, for the pre-fall season, for the 4 fashion weeks.
Not when I'm banned, I'm not. There's no downside. I love what I do. I'm like one of those sickening people who never has.
How long do you stay away from home the most?
Oh, not the longest is the beginning of the year, the fall season, and there's menswear starts in London because I do menswear and women's wear and couture, and menswear starts in the first week of January in London. And then it goes to Milan, menswear in Milan, then menswear in Paris, then there's couture, and then the women's wear starts in New York a week later, and then it goes to London, and then Milan, and then Paris. So that is the first week of January until the first week of March, and that's the biggest.
But you go home in between the shows? No,
I go home between couture and New York.
Okay, so it's been like 2 months
and that's
away
the longest
from home.
time I'm away.
That's why you always wear the same kind of T-shirt, because it's easy to stay
It's
away.
a different shirt. It's a different shirt.
I said the same
I do some laundry every now and again.
The same kind of prints.
But that was one
Yes.
question both me and Silvia had. How you got passionate by those printed shirts?
I have always, as somebody said to me the other day, it was
How
so-
did it begin?
It made me laugh. Somebody said to me the other day, I was wearing one of my other ones. I have about 300. And
300.
I don't wear suits. I mean, I'm not a snappy dresser. I just wear very loud shirts. And somebody said to me, oh, I bet you don't get to wear that shirt in London. Because I was in Sao Paulo, I was breaking out a big loud shirt. I was like, what? I mean, yeah, I wear these shirts everywhere. I wear these shirts at the North Pole. No, I like... I have a favorite shop in Auckland, New Zealand, and the shop is called Strangely Normal. And I would say most of my shirts come from the shop called Strangely Normal. And I don't
Really?
know...
Until now?
I don't know where... I just wanted to see if the slides are up, but they're not. I buy a lot of... I don't know where they get their fabrics, but they're amazing, amazing fabrics. Yeah.
So that's where you... and you
Strangely
have
normal.
them tailored for you?
No.
They have the
They
shirts.
sell them. Jared Leto said, where do you get your shirts? I want to get these shirts. And I told him they have a website, but they don't sell the good shirts on the website. You have to go to New Zealand to buy these shirts.
Go to Auckland.
And you don't need an excuse to go to New Zealand. It's where I'm from. It's the most beautiful country in the world. But if you do go to New Zealand, you can find my shirts at Strangely Normal in Auckland.
I love the name.
And they don't give them to me for free either. That's not a plug.
Tim, and how do you separate your own feelings? Of course, it's like football. You have your own team, the designers that you love. When you're going to see the show, how do you separate these feelings? And is it difficult when you really love the designer you
And
are
they
the
do
show?
something bad.
And what's your favorite brands?
My
by the way?
favorite designer for the longest time has been Miuccia Prada. And I've always said, even when a Prada show isn't good, her ideas are the best. She is the most thoughtful designer in fashion, and I love listening to her talk about fashion. Often what she says about the collection has absolutely nothing to do with the clothing. But I really, really love what she does. Like I said, even when I'm not liking the clothes, I love the ideas. There are a handful of designers I really look forward to every season. I always look forward to Dries van Noten. I look forward to Craig Green in London because it's really exciting to see what he's doing with his aesthetic, how it's evolving, how he's managed to evolve his aesthetic. I love Christopher Kane in London. I love Anna Sui in New York. I think she's one of fashion's great storytellers, and she deserves a lot more credit than she gets. But, you know, like we said before, they're not wonderful all the time. And when they're not wonderful, I will mention that, you know. Is that what the question was?
Yes,
it was.
Do you still have one, or I have my last one?
Do you have time? Or?
No, yeah, I have my last one, and then we're going to open for questions.
Really? Oh, that's the whole time we have.
Yes.
Okay.
What headline you have dreamed to write but never had the chance?
David Bowie stars a new Tim Blanks movie. That's the headline.
He's crazy about David Bowie.
David Bowie.
Since I was a baby,
Amazing.
I've loved David Bowie, yes. No, that would be the headline I would love to see in a newspaper. Unfortunately, it will never happen now. Or David Bowie
Who
writes
knows? Maybe we can are able to
Or
bring
Tim
people.
Blanks sings on your David Bowie album. That would be good too.
Of course.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, how?
So we can go on, and then there is questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have
Understood.
another
We have this
11
for the
minutes
questions.
Yes.
before questions.
So we have passed some of the
Think
that
of
we can
something
go
quickly.
back. Huh?
Think of something quickly.
No. I have a couple of here that I
can
have
sing.
not necessarily used. We were talking about BOF, and that was one of the questions I wanted to ask. Style.com, it's it's part of a big conglomerate of fashion. And as you already mentioned a little bit, there was a whole entourage that came with it. When you joined BOF, BOF was almost this underground publication in which suddenly became more important. We have seen it grew. Now we have panels like this and people, but BOF was just the founder. He's skinny, he looks like a kid. It was just this, quiet, sweet guy that was trying to show the business side of fashion. There was no storytelling or fashion critique attached to it. And now you have a lot of big names of fashion joining it. Do you think, how is it to work in an independent organism?
The thing about Style.com, in the same way that Fashion File put fashion on television for a massive audience, or Fashion File was one of the shows that put fashion on television, Style.com made writing about fashion a mass entertainment. I mean, with that huge audience where we'd get 20 million hits in a day when there was a big show like Marc Jacobs or something. And so that changed the game. That writing and writing about fashion became a sort of consumer entertainment. It wasn't just for industry people anymore. And what Business of Fashion has done is it did start as a site about the business of fashion. They had a lot of business stories. And Imran is a visionary. I mean, he's an amazing guy. His energy and his ability to see new things, it doesn't come along very often. To see that people would be interested in reading about that aspect of fashion. And then he brought me in, when I left Style.com, to bring that sort of consumer thing, to add the sort of review element that people who maybe didn't think they wanted to read about what was happening in, the fashion industry in India or what was happening in Russia or something. Because one thing that was very, very smart about the business of fashion was its global scope. Much more than anybody else, it addressed fashion as a global industry. And I think that's really been one of its strongest points. What's happened over the last few years, because it happened to me, I mean, I responded to the site the way other people do. When you pick up a copy of the New Yorker magazine and you look at the subjects that there are articles about, and you're thinking, I don't think I really want to read about how this new kind of mosquito has introduced a new virus in Newfoundland in Canada or something. And then you start reading the story, and suddenly it's the most interesting thing you've ever read. And that, to me, is what Business of Fashion is a little bit like. People keep saying to me, I'm obsessed. I'm reading all these stories about fashion, about the business of fashion, that I never thought I would be interested in. It's put a human face on the end. The fashion industry is huge. It's an absolutely massive industry. And what Business of Fashion has done is put a human face in a lot of cases, because there are stories all through that website. And then also aggregating stories from other places. So it's not just Business of Fashion stories, it's the best stories from Vogue or Fashionista or the Wall Street Journal or the Guardian or whatever, all aggregated on the site. And then plus what I came along, and I'm not a business writer, but I've added this sort of other element where, I might do profiles or things that are more sort of human interest, perhaps. And so it has become broader in its scope, and the audience has responded and grown, along with that. And it's become, a reference, which is like Style.com was a reference for the industry. And then Business of Fashion has become that kind of reference, I think, as well. Yeah, it's where I have my files. I want to read. So I told you this morning, I use it in the airplane. Do you have? Can I have my last question? Then you have your last question. Okay. You have the rise of the street fashion at something quite consistent for the last couple of years. You had Vetements, you have Balenciaga, and then there is Supreme, and now there is this whole polemic around Supreme. If it gets too big, and if the luxury industry take the street is not street anymore. Do you think that this big hype in brands that was supposed to be more street-oriented, or they
didn't need to be connected to a high luxury fashion brand, and now the high luxury fashion brand are taking advantage of them. Do you think this is a threat for the whole street boom? And do you think there's a new wave coming, or they are still consistent and persistent for a long time?
I think the marriage of sort of salon and street has been, the relationship has been on and off for decades. I mean, you look at what Gaultier was doing in the 90s, and there was the same debate about bringing in, excuse me, bringing in elements from street fashion, incorporating, and also bringing in elements of street, not street fashion, but street culture all around the world. It's interesting seeing the sort of turning street labels into these sort of really elite ideas, like Supreme, the limited edition, Palace, you know, these Palace in London, these product drops where if you're not there on the morning that it launches, forget it. And then it's on the internet for like $30,000 like the next day. Supreme with Louis Vuitton. I mean, £400 stuff is selling for £30,000. It's just crazy. So it's this sort of I don't know if it's a cultural shift. I think it's kind of interesting that labels which started as a reaction to you know, establishment, like the labels that became the labels that were considered to be orthodox, and then the labels that reacted against that are now the new establishment. So obviously, fashion is cyclical. There was this revolving. There will be a new wave. I think it's interesting. I was being interviewed the other day about logos, and I think it's interesting that the very first company that ever did logos was actually Valentino in the 60s. But this idea that the idea that real street, common like DHL with Vetements, DHL t-shirts, Titanic souvenir sweatshirts, things you could buy on Oxford Street for £5, selling for £1,200, being worn by Celine Dion. There's a sort of irony in this, I think, which is another thing. I talked about desire being a fundamental thing in fashion. Irony is a fundamental thing in fashion as well. And I think there's an incredibly ironic element in this relationship between street and salon. And you have Virgil Abloh, you know, with talking about luxury, talking about his product as luxury, as a luxury product. I don't think the new wave will be like street. I think that what's going to happen, you see inklings of it, is that what Supreme and Palace and these street labels, new street labels, have done is heighten an awareness of craft, of quality manufacturing. I mean, these products are not cheap products; they're not throwaway. And I think that will go on. That the next wave is going to be about craft and artisanship and the idea of selectivity and exclusivity and limited things. And I think the most interesting thing that happened in the season we've just seen, I sound very frog-like, I can hear in my ears, is that designers talking about finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. And thank you, Daniela. And I think that's going to be a really big thing going forward, that you take things that everybody's familiar with, thank you, and make them unfamiliar, and make them look new, and make them look exotic. That's the thing that excites me, I think, the most, because I also think that brings a political element into fashion. And right now, with the way the world is, fashion is going to be called on to be more and more political. not necessarily with slogans and protesting and so on, but it will represent a more and more viable alternative to what's happening in everybody's daily lives. And, you know, because fashion is special. There are clothes in this fashion, you know, and I think that that's going to be a much more political point. That was a really, really long way around that question. I'm sorry about that. I was thinking out loud.
Perfect insight.
And I think at the end you answer my question as well. That what was seen next for fashion, and you're talking about politics and
Yeah. Yeah, I think the next little while is going to be incredibly... It wasn't a great season clothes-wise, I didn't think, but I really loved ideas that were coming out. I loved what Mucha Prada was saying. I love that there is anger in fashion, and there hasn't been anger in fashion for a long, long time. I love that there's this sense that things have to change, and I love I love the ideal notion that fashion could be an agent of change. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I'm incredibly optimistic about what we're seeing. I think I'm quite pessimistic about a lot of other things, but I'm really optimistic about our work and what we will see, what we can contribute. So, I think it's time for questions.
Yes, it was a perfect way to end. Thank you very much. It was such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
You were brilliant in time. And now, como é que a gente faz?
Now we have the questions, no? Okay.
The what?
So now it's your slides.
Oh, okay. This is a slideshow that was made a few weeks ago when I did a talk at the Alexander McQueen Foundation in London. And it was just going to be playing while we were talking, and it's nothing specific about, I mean, it's just
But it's going to
beautiful
appear your
pictures of the
shirts.
collections.
Is that a part of the New Zealand shirts that you wear? Because you were looking at it when you were mentioning the store.
What?
It's only catwalk, or do you have the store that you have in
No,
New Zealand?
God, no. This is the shows as we just saw them in London and Milan
Last
and
season. Okay, so
Paris. Actually, Paris and Milan.
Paris and Milan, yeah. We can
And
start
some
with the
old photos.
questions. Pergunta, gente.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm really nervous, sorry. I was going to ask you about the next revolution of fashion, but you already answered. We just had the last Paris and New York Fashion Week a few weeks ago. What was your favorite show, and what do you think got you the most that changed fashion?
My favorite show was Versace because it was an incredible emotional moment. I'm talking about emotion and desire being important in fashion. What I loved as well, it made a very good point to me that it wasn't a nostalgic show. It showed clothes that you recognized from Versace's history, but it wasn't nostalgic. Those clothes look very right, I think, very desirable for right now. I wish designers would revisit their histories. I think it just proved to me that the past is an incredibly rich source for people, and it's not, fashion moves on, you know, and sometimes Alessandro Michele has said this, fashion doesn't need to move on. It doesn't need to be new every season. Sometimes you can just stop and appreciate and develop and you know, let it be organic. I think this is what Raf Simons is doing with Calvin Klein. It's what Michele is doing with Gucci. It's what Donatella did. It's a very exciting thing. I think that it's a sort of intelligent approach to fashion. I didn't hear the last bit of the question.
You just answered, but I have another question then is, what was your the last part was, we have all those outfits, all those sets, but what was your favorite piece of cloth that you think that could take a next step to fashion? That changes.
Yeah, this is the idea that I think designers are the best designers are thinking a lot more about what they do. They're thinking. I think everybody is much more aware of consequences, and that is something which is very inspiring for me. That I feel fashion is getting a lot more thoughtful It doesn't mean that it's getting more ordinary or more kind of serious or anything, but it's just getting a lot more thoughtful.
Próxima, tem uma menina de vermelho ali.
Hi team, my name is Lori Diaz, I'm a beauty artist. I wrote the question. So, thinking about see now, buy now collections here in Brazil, many stylists are choosing this option because of the fast money that comes, obviously. So, which path should they choose to balance genius creations and fast money?
Well, if you can get both of them, I mean, I think of this. I suppose it's quite a smart idea to do a handful of see now. You know, designers do that. They have stuff that's immediately available, and you have the label like Burberry is making everything right away. Because I'm a fan of the other way, so obviously if people can balance the two, or if see now, buy now works for people, obviously you know, like I said, I have a slightly different notion of it, but I can see how it would work for certain brands. I'm sure the same thing in Brazil. I'm sure there are designers who would rather have people think about, you know, anticipate their stuff.
We're in the middle of a fight. How many Brazilian designers? Patrícia Bonaldi está aqui, não está? Paty Bonaldi? A Elô está aqui? Well, I know they are in the middle of this discussion because half of the designers want to go back to the old system, and half of the designers want to keep with the see now, buy now.
It's not. I don't think it's an either or. I don't think it has to be one way or the other. And actually, that's one thing that's happening more and more is that there are so many options. There's so many different ways to do business now. There's so many more ways to do business than there were 30 years ago. So
you mentioned this in the beginning. See now, buy now might be a good solution for jeans wear and for things that.
And you know, if you have the capacity to do everything on a see now, buy now basis.
Burberry is amazing, the case of Burberry.
Yeah.
Burberry
Burberry has a lateral business, so they can do it. But you know, it's not going to work for
everyone.
For a little business, no.
Olá.
Aqui na ventilada, acho que tá.
Tem aqui.
Ah, tá aqui.
Olá, Tim. Boa tarde, tudo bom? Hi, Tim.
Hi.
My name is Tatiana, and this week there was a statement from Gucci House saying that it's going for free. I would like to know your opinion about it.
Well, I think that's a wonderful thing because I hate fur.
Me too, so that's good to hear.
I just don't. I think there are ways around that whole problem. I think it's a very, to me, it's a very old-fashioned expression of a sort of luxury, an appetite for luxury. I think it's amazing Gucci's done that. I think it just makes me love Gucci even more for everything that they're doing on behalf of the industry and energizing the industry in so many different ways. Silvia Fendi, as a designer, I have an enormous amount of time for. She's a wonderful, wonderful woman. I'm not sure I've ever seen her wearing a fur coat, maybe once or twice, but Fendi obviously is a banner business. She talked to me once, quite recently. I don't know if you've read about this company that is able to grow leather from cells, actually grow.
Biotech.
They are looking into growing fur. So that they don't need to kill animals anymore. I mean, that would be an amazing thing. I mean, that would be an amazing use of technology in fashion. You can grow fur. I'm sure there are some people who rather like the idea that something had to suffer for the coat on their back. But hopefully those people will learn to see that there's another way to do things.
And marvelous. And also another question regarding the leather industry. It's not fur, but also it's leather from cow. So what do you think? Because in last, I think in July, Vogue July with Giselle on the cover magazine, she was, there was a materia, I don't know how to say that in English, but with no fur, free fur. The entire magazine was, Vogue magazine was...
French Vogue, and
French
Giselle
Vogue.
was...
Yes, it was very beautiful.
It was not leather-free, but it was a fur-free magazine.
Fur-free, yeah,
So
because
you
there
mean-
was Chloe...
Do I also think everything should be leather-free as well?
Okay, perfect.
Do I? I don't know. I don't know what this is, but I think it's some Japanese thing. I hope it's not something synthetic. I don't know. I don't wear leather
Those are
either,
topics
so.
for the future, I think.
Yeah, but you know, I actually really like that. It's been an issue forever, but it feels now that it might be real again. It might be active. It might be something that people are.
Tim just became a vegetarian 4 months ago.
No, I didn't. I stopped eating meat. I saw that.
Yeah, he stopped eating meat. He's
I
not
saw that
vegetarian.
Tilda
that's
Swinton
great.
movie, Okja, about the super pig, and I just thought, oh,
Tá
never
no
again.
Netflix.
Yeah.
It's a cute movie. Thank you so much. Thank
Estamos
you very much.
evoluindo nessa questão,
Yes,
então, em todos os
marvelous.
âmbitos.
Thank you.
Hi, Tim.
Hi.
I'm a journalism student, and I would like to know, how do you preserve quality while with so little time to write?
I have more time. I used to do 12 reviews a night when I started. And that was, I don't know if there was any quality control there. But
Style.com, you used to do...
when I started work at Style.com, I'd be doing 12 reviews a night. When I would do men.style.com. I write 4 reviews a day at maximum, and that might be a couple of thousand words in a day. And I'm working on it a lot more than really focusing a lot more now and trying to make them. Because once upon a time, to me, it was all about the immediacy. I just loved, there were days when I would not sleep. I would be up for three days maybe, because it would be all shows all day and then writing all night. And I just loved how immediate that was. As I got older, immediacy seemed to take more out of me. And I started, I want it to be, I want it to be a good story. So, it doesn't always, obviously it doesn't always work. I have good days and I have bad days, but I do actually try and make a point of making it as good as I can.
So you choose some shows that you're going to write
Yeah.
about, and you just leave it.
I believe it's more important in this second digital wave to be more flexible.
Instead
to
of
connect.
critiquing
Yeah.
everything, just
Oh, no,
pointing.
yeah, I mean, at Style.com, we used to do everything. At Business of Fashion, we don't cover everything. We don't do pre-collections, for example, which doubled the workload. When pre-collections came in, it doubled. We don't do that at BOF.
They don't even run in shows. They are so calm and tranquil, and they're always there. It's true. I don't know if you go to all the shows or you just seem to be calm, but
I like to have a glass of wine at lunch. I find that calms me down. Or a bottle.
we do too.
Very calming.
Hi, team. My name is
Hi.
Anna. I'm a fashion stylist, and you talk about Style.com. I was a huge fan of Style.com, and you
Me
work
too.
there. Yeah, and I would like to know, how do you see now this digital era and the covering of websites of fashion industry, and how do you see the difference about it in fashion magazines? As people say that fashion shows are dead, and how do you think about people saying that fashion magazines are dead too?
Ridiculous. I don't agree with that at all. What has changed is that fashion magazines actually, I think, have become more special. It's why you see so many magazines that come out twice a year. The industry has changed. Obviously, the magazine industry has taken a real knock from digital, the whole digital invasion. But there are still amazing magazines, I think, that have become like fetish objects. They're expensive, they come out twice a year. So if you think you bought a magazine every month, it'd be like, what, £5 or something. That's £60 over a year. So you buy 2 magazines that are £30 each. These big, thick, like Bibles, but full of stuff. And if these magazines are like fetish objects in themselves, but they also fetishize fashion in a way that reminds me of the magazines I used to look at when I first started looking at fashion magazines in the 70s, where French Vogue would have